Psalm 121. And the heading for this psalm is actually God the help of those who seek him. That's a wonderful thing, isn't it? God the help of those who seek him. It says, I will lift up my eyes to the hills. From whence comes my help? My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. He will not allow your foot to be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. Behold, he who keeps Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord shall preserve you from all evil. He shall preserve your soul. The Lord shall preserve your going out and your coming in, from this time forth and even forevermore. Amen. Some call this the Soldier's Psalm. I think it was penned in the camp when David was in danger as he contemplated many things. And if we were to look at Psalm 120, within the framework of Psalm 120, the writer mentioned distress, lying lips, deceitful tongues, sharp arrows, burning coals, hateful people and warmongers. His soul was overwhelmed with problems. His outlook looked bleak and his future threatened. Then suddenly things changed as a thrilling hope filled his soul. David said, I will lift up my eyes to the hills, from whence comes my help. A great resolve had gripped him, and he was determined to focus his vision upon the Lord who had been his refuge in trouble. He referred to God as his keeper, watchman, and the guardian of his soul. Perhaps David was thinking about the city employees whose trained eyes watched for the approach of enemies. They were reliable men. They were implicitly trusted by the people. Their dedication to duty guaranteed the safety of the citizens. David compared that situation with his own soul, where the Lord was a constant watchman. The fear expressed in Psalm 120 was replaced by fellowship, and the lies of David's enemies were forgotten as he remembered the promises of God. The renewal of the king's trust in Jehovah revived his impoverished soul. And Psalm 121, I think, is one of the most reassuring of all David's writings. And there's 5 things we can see in this psalm as we look at it this morning. The first thing is in verse 5. Verse 5, how safe the Lord is thy keeper. The Lord is thy keeper. Certain qualifications were necessary for all men who aspired to be watchmen of any city. They were required to be vigilant, trustworthy, and courageous. If the men did not exhibit such attributes, they were not accepted by the elders. The cities were surrounded by high walls, and when danger threatened, everyone retired within their stronghold. When an alarm was heard, people prepared to defend their property, and any official who slept when in duty was considered unworthy of trust. The same facts applied to those who guarded the vineyards in those days. Each parcel of land had its watchtower where men resided to safeguard the vines. And wild pigs were a menace, and they could destroy property overnight. But our keeper is not only on the throne looking down on us, but he is at our side to shield us from all harm. This does not mean, of course, that obedient believers never find themselves in difficulty or danger, or that they will never feel physical and emotional pain. The things that God permits to happen to us in his will may hurt us, but they will not harm us. They will not harm us. I remember reading about Corrie ten Boom. You know Corrie ten Boom, who was in the Nazi death camp in Ravensbrück during the the Nazis, when they killed all those Jewish people. And Corrie ten Boom wrote about that Nazi death camp in Ravensbrück, where roll call came at 4:30 a.m. every morning. And most mornings there were cold, and sometimes a woman would be forced to stand without moving for hours in the bone-chilling pre-dawn darkness. And nearby were the punishment barracks, where all day and far into the night would come the sounds of cruelty. Blows landing in regular rhythm and screams keeping pace. But Corrie and her sister Betsy, who was with her, had a Bible. And at every opportunity they would gather the women together like orphans around a blazing fire and read from Romans chapter 8. From verse 35 to 39 she said, and it says this: "Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation, or distress, or persecution, or famine, or nakedness, or peril, or sword? In all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us." Corrie later said, "I would look about us," as Betsy read from the scriptures, watching the light leap from face to face in those women, and it struck me, more than conquerors. It was not a wish, it was a fact. It was a fact. We knew, we experienced it minute by minute in an ever-widening circle of help and hope. Life at Ravensbrück, she said, took place on two separate levels. One was the observable, external life that grew every day more horrible. And the other, she said, the life we lived with God grew daily better. Truth upon truth, glory upon glory. The things that God permits to happen to us in his will may hurt us, but they will not harm us. David had many experiences that brought heartache and even threatened his life. But the Lord enabled David to turn these seeming tragedies into beautiful psalms that encourage us today, like Psalm 121. And you know, the Lord at our right hand provides the shade that we need. That's why David could say in Psalm 63 and verse 7, "Because you have been my help, therefore in the shadow of your wings I will rejoice." It was not a cause for amazement when David compared his soul with the vineyards. He was encouraged by the fact that Jehovah was his keeper. God's ability was sufficient to protect everybody. David realised the guardian of his vineyard was also the good shepherd within whose fold he was perfectly safe. How safe then? The Lord is thy keeper. And then in verse 5 also, how sheltered, the Lord is thy shade upon thy right hand. The Lord is thy shade upon thy right hand. You know, throughout the vast expanse of eastern deserts, shade was hard to locate. The limitless horizons of sandy wilderness often became a nightmare for desperate travellers. The sun shone mercilessly upon a barren landscape, and fresh water was impossible to find. Occasionally stony outcrops could be reached, and during devastating sandstorms, these provided limited protection against nature's onslaught. Travellers accustomed to desert conditions knew where such shade could be found, and they hurriedly sought shelter when sandstorms were approaching. It's the same with God. God is our shade. He is always near to his people for their protection and refreshment, and never at a distance. He is their shade in their right hand, so that he is never far to seek. And the right hand, of course, is a working hand, and when we live for God, we shall find God near to us to assist us in our daily routines. David wrote in Psalm 91 verse 1, "He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty." David compared the shady place with the secret place, and within both the soul could find refuge. The shade from excessive heat and glare offered temporary relief. Abiding in the secret place of the Most High expressed a blessedness which could last forever. How safe? The Lord is thy keeper. How sheltered? The Lord is thy shade upon thy right hand. And then thirdly in verse 7, how secure? The Lord shall preserve thee from all evil. The Lord shall preserve thee from all evil. Safety suggests protection. Shelter offers peace. Security promises prosperity. And you know, whether the Christian goes out to battle or home to rest, the presence of God guarantees success. Success is a wonderful thing. I heard the funny story about Donald Trump. Donald Trump was in Scotland on his first visit, and he meets with John Swinney, and he asks John Swinney, the first leader of Scotland, the secret of his great success. Swinney tells him, you just have to have a lot of intelligent people around you, Donald. How do you know so quickly if someone is intelligent? Asks Donald Trump. So John Swinney says, let me demonstrate. So Swinney picks up the phone and he calls Angus Robertson and he asks him a question. He says, Angus, it's your father's son, but it's not your brother. Who is it? Without hesitation, Angus Robertson answers quite simply. He said, it's me. It's me. You see, Swinney tells Trump, this is how I test people's intelligence. Donald Trump was so thrilled that he flies home and immediately he called his Vice President, J.D. Vance, and he asked him the same question. He says, J.D., it's your father's son, but it's not your brother. Who is it? And after much back and forth and thinking about things, J.D. Vance says, I've no idea, but I will try to find out the answer by tomorrow. So he can't figure it out and he decides to seek advice from former President Obama. So he phones Barack Obama and he says, Barack, it's your father's son, but it's not your brother. Who is it? Barack Obama says, it's me. Happy to have found the answer, Vance then calls Trump and says, I've got the answer. It's Barack Obama. Trump rages and says, no, you idiot, it's Angus Robertson. But, you know, for the Christian, the presence of God guarantees success. It's easy. It was easy for the children of Israel to believe this fact. For the cloud above the tabernacle by day and the pillar of fire by night, in Exodus chapter 40, from verse 34 to 38, tells us that it signified God was always with his people. He was a shield between them and the enemy. And that explains to us their military success. When the Hebrews left Egypt, they had no military experience nor weapons. The people were a disorganized multitude. Moses received some training in the Egyptian army, but without the help of God, without the help of Jehovah, the nation would have perished in the wilderness. That the Lord promised protection from all evil revealed the magnitude of his capability. The significant superiority of other nations became meaningless when God displayed his irresistible might. And you know, often when Israel was about to be overwhelmed, the prophet of God stood majestically before the enemy and seemed to hold the future in his hand. In 2 Kings chapter 6, the king of Syria has surrounded Dothan to capture Elisha, and it tells us when the servant of the man of God was risen early and gone forth, there was a great army surrounding the city with horses and chariots. And his servant said to him, Alas, my master, what shall we do? And we find that Elisha answered and said, Do not fear, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And Elisha prayed and said, Lord, I pray, open his eyes that he may see. And the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw. And behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire around Elisha. And when he came down to him, Elijah prayed unto the Lord and said, Lord, smite this people, I pray thee, with blindness. And God struck them with blindness, according to the word of Elisha. And Psalm 121 verse 7 tells us, the Lord shall preserve you from all evil. He shall preserve your soul. God will keep your soul. God is the only keeper of the soul. Our soul is kept from the dominion of sin, the infection of error, the crush of depression, and the puffing of pride, as well as from the world, the flesh, and the devil. It's kept for holier and greater things, kept in the love of God, kept for the eternal kingdom and glory. What can harm a soul that is kept by the Lord? How safe the Lord is thy keeper, how sheltered the Lord is thy shade upon thy right hand, and how secure the Lord shall preserve thee from all evil. And fourthly, how special the sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night. Verse 6. In Psalm 97 verse 10, the psalmist said, you who love the Lord hate evil. He preserves the souls of his saints. He delivers them out of the hand of the wicked. We spoke about Corrie ten Boom when in Ravensbrück earlier on, and she later also said in her writing, she said, when Jesus takes your hand, he keeps you tight. When Jesus keeps you tight, he leads you through your life. When Jesus leads you through your life, he brings you safely home. And that's the experience I had recently. For 3 months we sat in a hospital bed with my son-in-law, and this was the great hope we had as we held his hand, but Jesus was holding his other hand. The psalm writer evidently believed divine protection was conditional. God did not preserve all people irrespective of their spirituality. The injunction to hate evil placed a moral obligation upon all who desired his assistance. The grace of God could be seen by all people, but his glory was shared only with saints. The psalmist emphasised that God preserves the souls of his saints. Jesus expressed similar truth when he said in Matthew chapter 10 from verse 29 to 31, Jesus said, are not 2 sparrows sold for a farthing? And one of them shall not fall on the ground without your Father, but the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Fear ye not, therefore, ye are of more value than many sparrows. He doesn't need to worry about my hair then, eh? I heard about the man who was bald and he went to a beauty shop and he said to the stylist, I went for a hair transplant but I couldn't stand the pain. He said, if you can make my hair look like yours without causing me any discomfort, he said, I'll pay you £5,000. No problem, said the stylist, and she quickly shaved her head. But God is our shelter. Only the Lord can shelter us from these tremendous forces. These 2 great lights rule the day and the night, and under the lordship of both we work and rest in equal safety. There are dangers in the light and in the dark. Nevertheless, in both and from both we will be preserved in several ways. Literally, from excessive heat and poisonous chills, mystically, from any harmful effects that might follow from doctrine, bright or dim, spiritually, from the evils of prosperity and adversity, and eternally from the strain of overpowering glory and from the pressure of terrible events such as judgment. All evil may be ranked as under the sun or under the moon, and if neither of these can strike us, then we indeed as God's people are secure. How safe the Lord is thy keeper, how sheltered the Lord is thy shade upon thy right hand, how secure the Lord shall preserve thee from all evil, how special the sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night, and lastly, how splendid the Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in, from this time forth and from evermore, verse 8 tells us. David knew that some professions of friendship failed to stand the test of time. They seldom endured through continuing hardship. And there was a great quote I heard from Oprah Winfrey, believe it or not. And she said this: lots of people want to ride with you in your limo, but what you want is someone who will take the bus with you when the limo breaks down. That's good, isn't it? David had friends who seldom endured through continuing hardship. Even members of his own royal family had been rebellious. Absalom, his son, had been guilty of this such thing. Yet other people had remained loyal to the king, even amid the most distressing episodes of his life. We find that in 2 Samuel chapter 17. True friends were more desirable than gold. Yet David realised that even his most loyal comrades could not be compared with the Lord. Human assistance could only continue until death, but the favour of the Lord was forevermore. It lasted through time and into eternity. And when David reminisced, it was even easy to remember occasions when God enabled him to overcome very difficult circumstances. The triumph over Goliath, remember that? That was only one example of how strength had been made perfect in David's weakness. And oftentimes when death appeared to be imminent for David, he relied upon the unfailing promises of God, and he exclaimed in Psalm 23 verse 4, remember that great shepherd psalm? He said, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. David looked back with gratitude. He looked back with gratitude and onward with confidence, because his heavenly Father was reliable. And friends, that's the message today. Our heavenly Father is reliable. We can depend upon him for everything. When we go to work in the morning, or whatever we are doing throughout the day, and when we come home in the evening, God preserves us. And as we begin life, and when we die, we will experience the same keeping. Our exits and our entrances are under his protection. In this psalm, from verses 7 to 8, we can see we have this phrase. We have this phrase, the Lord shall preserve. It's interesting that they say this 3 times in this psalm. 3 times. As if the sacred Trinity sealed this word to make it sure. Look what it says in verses 7 and 8. The Lord shall preserve you from all evil. He shall preserve your soul. The Lord shall preserve. But you know, it's interesting, it doesn't say we will never suffer or sorrow. Though we may be hurt, we won't be harmed. He shall preserve your soul. The Lord shall preserve your going out and your coming in from this time forth and even forevermore. Moses was a true servant of God, called to and fitted for his great work. But Moses had times, if we read his story, he had times of great anxiety. Then he made his appeal to God. He recalled God's gracious words, and as we read the record, we see how faithfully God fulfilled his promises to him. So God's children, passing through this falling world, and with remaining evil within, against which there must be watchfulness and war, have times of fear, of deep anxiety, and there is one way and but one of getting out of them. And the psalmist gives us the remedy. In Psalm 50, verse 15, it says, call upon me. Call upon me, God says, in the day of trouble. I will deliver you, and you shall glorify me. God is our helper and keeper. No matter where our path in life leads us, if we walk in his will, he will preserve us. And we can walk with confidence today. We have a helper, a keeper, and a preserver who will see us through. How safe, the Lord is thy keeper. How sheltered, the Lord is thy shade upon thy right hand. How secure, the Lord shall preserve thee from all evil. How special, The sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night. And how splendid! The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth and even forevermore. What a psalm. What a glory it is to know that the Lord is our keeper. And what a wonderful thing it is to know as Christians, as God's people, that God shall never leave us nor forsake us. Thank you so much for listening. Let's just close in prayer.